You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts now.
All right, guys, we need to talk about Stephen A. Smith. Stephen Anthony Smith. This man, I don't think he's ever tried to avoid a race conversation at all. Sometimes I think these people in the mainstream media, they go out there and they try to make up stuff about race. I'm being honest about that. Stephen A. Smith, when he's on ESPN, even when he's on his own podcast, he always says, as a black man, okay? Now, Stephen A. Smith does not speak for all black people. He speaks for himself. Now, Stephen A. has said that black people have told him, hey, Stephen A., you got to go out there, man. You got to speak for us and all this other stuff. Do I believe that? No, I don't. I don't believe that. I don't believe that black people are actively calling for Stephen A. Smith to speak the way he does. Maybe I'm naive or something, but I'm just not buying that. Astonishing, man. Stephen A. Smith is the face of ESPN. He was the highest paid person at ESPN. Now, why was he actually the highest paid person? He was the face of ESPN. He was on like everything. NBA, First Take. Then Pat McAfee comes along, Troy Aikman comes along. And with Aikman, it's a bit different because, that's the NFL. He's making more money than Stephen A. Smith. Pat McAfee had his own thing. He was doing that. He signed with ESPN, and he's making more money on ESPN than Stephen A. Smith. But Stephen A. Smith has said when the time comes, he believes that ESPN is going to take care of him. However, Stephen A. Smith always has to play the race card. Why? Does he actually feel like he's getting something out of that by playing a race card? This man made an idiotic statement about Pat McAfee. Pat McAfee's white. Stephen A. is black. But Stephen A. is trying to make it seem like, he is the victim. Now, who is actually running ESPN? It's a bunch of people on the left. Walt Disney Company. Pretty much Democrats, right? Stephen A. Smith says something that is going to shock you guys here. So let's get into it. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, become a channel member, live stream every single Friday. We appreciate the support. Just starts at $5 per month. Look at this, guys. Stephen A. Smith, Pat McAfee doesn't have to be as polished at ESPN because he's white. What? I mean, this is crazy right here. This is Stephen A. Smith's words here. He was actually on a podcast. I don't know the name of this podcast. Says, if we're being honest, he's white and I'm black. He doesn't have to be. I had to be. So I get all that. And I'm not knocking him for it. Wait a minute. So because you're black, you have to be more polished. ESPN is a bunch of people on the left that's running it, Democrats, who you actually vote for, Stephen A. Smith. So you're saying that if you weren't as polished, okay, as a black person, you wouldn't have the platform that you have? Stephen A., you mess up a lot. Okay, we all do. Pat McAfee great at what he does. Independent. Now he's not so much independent anymore. ESPN is cutting a check. This is idiotic in my opinion. Look at this here. Pat McAfee has soaked up more than his fair share of attention since joining ESPN less than 6 months ago. But his teammate at the worldwide leader in woke, Stephen A. Smith, takes no issue with McAfee's no-holds-barred approach. Speaking in an interview on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast released Tuesday, Smith explained why he respects McAfee and how their public personas have to differ because of who they are. Now, the thing is, like I said before, McAfee did not come from the mainstream. So when he was actually talking to ESPN, he said, hey, I don't want to change anything. ESPN said, okay, even though they actually bleep out a lot of the curse words and stuff like that. So his show, for the most part, hasn't changed. But Stephen A., you became who you are because you were in the mainstream sports media. McAfee wasn't. So you had to abide by, ESPN. Now you have your own podcast now. It's growing. Congratulations to you. But why do you have to make this a black and white thing? You're from the mainstream media. He's not. I mean, it's just that simple, man. I mean, who's actually stopping you really from making your own opinions? I mean, you have your own podcast. I mean, you could have just quit ESPN, but you're not going to do it because you love those paychecks. You're capitalist, right? I mean, Jason Whitlock goes out there. He speaks his mind. He does his own thing. Why don't you quit ESPN and do your own thing on your own podcast then? Let's listen in, man, to what Stephen A. Smith had to say. Let's roll it.
A guy like McAfee, who is extremely good at his job, in a lot of ways is changing the course of mainstream media and all those things from a competitive standpoint and also as a partner.
I am an aberration in this regard. I love Pat McAfee.
He's a man.
Love him to death. Love him to death. I love his swag. I love the fact that he's an honest brother. He don't give a shit. He'll let you know exactly where he stands. That's my kind of dude. That works for me. Now, is he as polished politically as me? Nope. Because he has no desire to be, number one. And number two, if we're being honest, he's white and I'm black. He didn't have to be. I had to be. So I get all of that. And I'm not knocking him for it. I get it. Pat McAfee is a sensational talent. And it would be stupid for me not to root for him, because he's one of the pioneers in this business, just like Bill Simmons is, just like Joe Rogan is, and others. What they have done for themselves in the digital stratosphere speaks for itself. I'm new to this. I'm a baby. I'm approaching 550,000 subscribers in 10 and a half months.
Okay, so you guys heard that right there. Stephen A. Smith is definitely, his podcast is independent, okay? So he doesn't need ESPN's approval to say what he wants to say on his own podcast. But Stephen A., you mentioned Rogan. You mentioned Bill Simmons. They were independent. They go out there and do what they want to do. Now, Joe Rogan, he's coming back to YouTube, I believe, probably sometime this week. His full show is going to be on YouTube. Guess what? Pat McAfee was allowed to drop all the F-bombs he wanted because he wasn't on the mainstream media. You couldn't do that because you were on First Take. Now you're on your own platform. You can do it. Has nothing to do with race. None whatsoever, man. So you mean to tell me if you start dropping a whole bunch of F-bombs and you're not keeping it clean, not per se, that ESPN's going to fire you? I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that. This is nothing more than Stephen A. Smith trying to race bait again. And it's absolutely pathetic. That's just my thoughts on this. What do you guys think of this? Black and white sports fans, let us know what you think about all this in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.